All right. Daniel, will you open us up in a word of prayer, please?
Lord, thank you for giving us this time and this place we can meet together and learn more about you. I pray that you bless the services this morning, Lord. You would give the teachers the words you'd have them to bring to us, Lord. Help us to understand them, focus on them, and learn from them. Please keep everyone safe, Lord. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. All right, we're in chapter 22 of Proverbs. Continuing on. I think I only got about 7 verses in. But first, I want to do some Fear of the Lord verses, since I think I had about 50 or so, just sprinkling those through. So let's start with this one, Proverbs 9:10. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and the knowledge of the holy is understanding. Psalm 19:9. The fear of the Lord is clean, enduring forever. The judgments of the Lord are true and righteous altogether. And I'd like to finish up with Genesis 22:12. So context, this is Abraham and Isaac, the potential sacrifice. And he said, lay not thine hand upon the lad, neither do thou anything unto him, for now I know that thou fearest God, seeing thou hast not withheld thy son, thine only son from me. It's always interesting to put yourself in those positions of people in the Bible and try to think how you would handle it. And when I was younger, I always thought it was kind of a mean thing. But when I got older, and I got a little bit more discernment and things like that, I realized that, it was a type, and it wasn't mean at all. It would have been mean if he'd actually killed him. I mean, I guess if he hadn't raised him from the dead, at least it sure would have seemed mean. But Abraham had faith in God. He had the fear of the Lord. He respected him. And as we've talked, the fear of the Lord doesn't just mean fear. It means respect as much as anything else. So with that in mind, fear of the Lord is throughout the Bible, and it's definitely throughout Proverbs. You have to be saved first. In order to be saved, you probably have some fear of the Lord and fear of hellfire, fear of judgment. And then once you get saved, you also need to have fear of the Lord so that you will not become a carnal Christian. It's always good to look at yourself and see, hey, am I doing what God wants me to do? You can always do more, right? At least that's what it seems like. We can do more, and that's true. But you also have to know your limits, and that can be valuable. I'm very thankful that we have all the helpers we have for Art and Wanda. That's awesome. For Justin, all the work he does, for the people who clean and all that stuff, because when this church was much tinier, and especially when we didn't have a pastor for a couple times, I had to do a lot more. And it's not that I don't want to do stuff. I'm happy to do stuff, but I've learned that I am not like my dad, who can just go and go and go. He could just break down tires, Army truck tires, see him out by our shop, taking a sledgehammer to these big old combat tread Army truck tires, breaking them down, trying to break the bead. I could never do that at my strongest. When I was younger, when I was lifting weights regularly and stuff, I couldn't do that. We're different, but I'm thankful for all the help and everybody who's in here, because we can't do everything, right? Heard from another pastor, many hands make light work. And so it's a shared load. And when everybody's working, or at least most of the people are working, then the burden is much, much lighter. So, all right. With that aside, let's go ahead and go to chapter 22, Proverbs. So I finished off, let's see, with verse 7, I think, just talking about debt. Debt is something that can be very dangerous. But used properly, it can be helpful, such as buying a house, or potentially an automobile. But you don't want to incur more debt than you can pay off, and you want to make wise decisions regarding the debt. And this isn't a financial health class or anything like that. It's a Sunday school class, but basic principles are, you want fixed interest. You don't want a variable rate, because then if something happens in the economy, we've seen variable rates shoot up your payments. I know a guy in Canada actually, but it happens in the U.S. too. But I know a young guy got his first house, and then he lost it a couple of years later, because when the rates went up so much here recently, he couldn't afford $2,000 a month, whereas before he was paying $1,000 a month. So, you need to exercise some worldly wisdom combined with some godly wisdom. Don't go into a bunch of debt. Be aware of the risks of debt. Credit cards are generally bad unless you are extremely disciplined. And I don't know anybody who is, because unless the very disciplined person is the one managing the finances, which is good advice anyway. But when you're married, it's very challenging to be on the same page regarding these things. And even if somebody doesn't waste their money, like, hey, we're going to Disneyland and we're going to outlay thousands of dollars, it's easy to just go to Walmart and buy stuff that you don't really need. But it's kind of therapeutic. I mean, that's kind of more of a woman thing. But hey, if I go buy a tool at Home Depot, that can be fun too. So either way, you get a dopamine rush. It makes you feel better. But money is a big thing for women, because they they do the vast majority of the purchasing. It's like, I don't know, it's like 80%. They spend the most money because they're taking care of the home. Okay, so, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. That's their job. But it's easy to get yourself in trouble. And I'm sure everybody in here knows that. But all right, so verse 8, continuing on. Let's see, put 8 and 9 together. He that soweth iniquity shall reap vanity, and the rod of his anger shall fail. He that hath a bountiful eye shall be blessed, for he giveth of his bread to the poor. So this is kind of one of those examples. A lot in Proverbs all the time. There's an anti-message, and then I'm using the wrong term, but there's a pro and a con. There's a good and a bad. There's a positive example and negative example, or vice versa. So this is kind of something that it's honestly one verse probably. So he that soweth iniquity. So somebody who's just, we're not talking about the average person here, but somebody who is just sinning all the time. Now, an unsaved person, God doesn't look at anything they do as good. So it can definitely apply to them, even if they are quote unquote good. That being said, I think that the evil person in the world versus the worldly good person will reap much more evil, like Hitler. I mean, he went wild the first few years, but it didn't end up well for him. And Kelly mentioned Stalin as well. Go through your list of dictators, and almost all of them have met with really bad ends. Almost all of them. Gaddafi, he had a rough time of it. So, what do they get? They get vanity. So they spend all this time, money, effort, emotion, and they reap vanity. And vanity just means it's empty. Yeah. When I was younger, I thought vanity is like, oh, you mean you care about your looks or something, you're vain. Well, your looks are going to deteriorate whether you like it or not, no matter how much you invest in it with plastic surgery or skincare products or whatever. Well, the point of the matter is it's something that doesn't last. It's something that has no long-term value. I've got thousands of dollars of computer parts that somebody just gave me. Except the problem is they were worth thousands of dollars about 10 years ago. Now they're not really worth anything. And I look at this stuff and I go, this is so nice. It's so well crafted and so much money went into this, but it's not worth anything now. Because computer parts, like a CPU, ounce per ounce is more valuable than gold, but it doesn't keep its value. So whereas gold is a good investment because it's always going to, have value, a CPU is going to be doing this. Almost never do they ever appreciate because of technology. So the only way it's ever going to have value in the future is if somebody needs that one for some reason. They've got a really old computer system. And so those cases do exist, but in the overall, they have lost almost all their value. In fact, so much in most cases it's effectively zero. So a car loses lots of money. You drive it off the lot, but as long as the car will still move around, it still has some value. Anyway. So vanity is just emptiness. So they're reaping nothing. They're investing all this stuff, and the rod of his anger shall fail. So this is basically, whatever he's trying to do. He's angry. He wants to punish somebody. He wants to have vengeance. It's going to fail long term. He might get some short-term satisfaction, but in the Bible, God talks about. I think it was rod of anger. He used that for Assyria. He used them to punish it was Israel, right? Okay. So he used Assyria to punish Israel. So the rod could be figurative in most cases in this day and age. It probably would be, but I have written down here, it all ends in tears. That's just kind of the way it is when you sow to the flesh. Even the world knows this. They use terms like karmic retribution and whatnot, but really it's you reap what you sow. Verse 9, on the other hand, he that hath a bountiful eye shall be blessed, or blessed, for he giveth of his bread to the poor. All right, so bountiful, so sometimes I look at words, I think I know the meaning too, because I want to be sure. This is a simple word. I always thought bountiful meant like lots of stuff, like we had a bountiful harvest. But really, bountiful just means good. It can mean joyful. It can also mean kind. So if you have a kind eye and you giveth of your bread to the poor, so you're willing to share, that makes God happy. Now, as I've said, we don't have poor here really, because we have all these government assistance, plus people will give money to the panhandlers, and we've heard stories about them driving Mercedes home and stuff. And there's a lady at Costco in Boise, she's always there. I gotta respect her work ethic. She's there, rain or shine. And I'm sure, it must pay off for her. I don't know why she can't work. She's standing there the whole time. But where I think we've seen an instance of this is with Hurricane Helene primarily, which is, we still need to keep praying about that. Milton came through and kind of took a bunch of people's attentions off, and we have the election coming, and it's easy to not think about this stuff. But these people are still devastated. Their problems haven't magically been fixed. Some, I think most of the dead have been found, but there are still about 250 people missing. So, but this is where I think, as an American, people have had opportunities to really be blessed by God here, because in our church has been a part of that, because we've given some money, and I fully support giving more, and I think everybody in here would as well, because if we can give money through another church, not just randomly to some Red Cross or something like that, and then they can have an outreach. And as we saw on the prayer channel today, somebody went around and prayed with the people in their neighborhood, and absolutely that made a difference. So that is something that makes God happy, and it blesses you, right? You person went around and prayed with these people, took his kids get to see that as an example, and then, do you think he was unhappy that he did it? No, I mean, he was blessed. He was privileged to do that. He was honored that God would use him in that way. God likes kindness. That being said, don't confuse kindness with nice. Okay? I think Jesus was always kind, except when he invoked righteous anger. Being kind does not mean being nice. But if you lie to somebody or you let them live in their sin, when you can tell them otherwise, that's not kind. So God, I'm not going to be dogmatic saying Jesus was always kind or anything like that, because that's, he wasn't. But God does like it when you're kind to people. And so if we can go out and we can reach out in some fashion, God likes that. And he definitely does not like it when you're mean to people, especially those who have had a rough life already. We know from the Bible that not everybody's trials and tribulations are because of sin. We talked about that Wednesday night, even. So if somebody starts out with a rough life, that doesn't mean they're off the hook, right? If they still do crimes, but it does mean that we don't go out of our way to torture them or anything like that. And for some reason, there are some people that feel like it's that, I don't know, that amuses them. I was never that kind of a person, so I don't know. All right, so verse 10, cast out the scorner, and contention shall go out, yea, strife and reproach shall cease. So, I mean, I look at this and I'm like putting this immediately into the church for application. Of course, this is Old Testament, different dispensation entirely. So it's a little bit different, but I think that's a fine application. We have the process with church discipline for people to go out. If somebody is causing problems, there's a process, and it doesn't always have to go to church discipline or anything. In fact, that's for more extreme cases, the public and notorious sin. But you can definitely talk to the person. If somebody's a Christian, you should be able to talk to them and say, this is not helpful. But you got to do it with love and with a gentle spirit. You got to be very careful, okay? Because sometimes people can be okay. But if they're going to cause division in the church, then, well, God hates that, and they don't belong there. But this can be, the Amish, as I mentioned before, they shun, so they actually cast people out of their community as well. If somebody rejects their values, they won't tolerate it because they need harmony to keep their way of life going. All right, so all right, verse 11. He that loveth pureness of heart, for the grace of his lips, he that loveth pureness of heart, for the grace of his lips, the king shall be his friend. So, if you have a pure heart and your lips are filled with grace, which, guess what? It comes from wisdom. The king shall be his friend. A wise king is always trying to find the truth. A wise leader is trying to find the truth. I listened to General Mattis's book, autobiography, which was actually a little boring because he's so professional. But he was called sign Chaos. He was he was the epitome, the Marine, epitome of, Marines are no better friend, no worse enemy. If we'll be your friend, we'll take care of your sick, the corpsman will go out, we'll bring you food, we'll fix stuff, but if you blow us up, well, we're gonna hurt you. And he made a comment in his book, and it was the last time, it's like when you become a one-star general, or maybe that's, you no longer get the truth once you get so high. You can't get to the truth. It's like executives in most companies. They get big enough, they become a CIO or a CEO or something, CFO. They don't know what's going on in the trenches. And people don't tell them because every manager wants to look good. If they tell them stuff, they're going to tell it in the most positive light. And it's going to be, we have a challenge, but we're resolving this challenge. Somebody at one of the places I worked was fired because they always said things are going good, things are going good, things are going good, and then they didn't hit a marker, and I thought everything was fine. And then it's just excuses. It's like, you can't say things are going fine and then fail to hit your mark. Every leader wants to know the truth. They also want to know you have a plan for solving it, right? If you're in a leader's position, if you're not, if the person reporting to you is a leader, if the person reporting to you is a subordinate, that's great too, if you've got a problem. But, so my point here is a king wants to hear the truth, and they want honest people, they want unafraid people, but they need to be wise and respectful. It's like sometimes the king, or choose your leader, has to make a decision against your advice. He's heard you. That doesn't mean you keep fighting with him. And this is kind of a little bit what wives have to do, because I value my wife's advice, and I take it frequently, but occasionally I don't take it. And if I've heard her and I've prayed about it, and it's not just a knee-jerk reaction, I don't want to keep arguing about it. She's given me her advice. And, some women, some wives are like, yeah, I'm not doing that. Like, if I decided God wanted me to, move to, where's someplace you don't like? I don't know. Michigan? No, you'd probably be okay with that. But just move somewhere that she doesn't like. I can't think of a place off the top of my head. And if she was like, nope, not moving. Kids are going to school here. I got friends here. My church is here. That's not a submissive wife. It's not a submissive subordinate, or anything else. You can fight against your leaders. So as an employee, you try to build a relationship with your boss so you can give him advice, honest, wise advice as far as you see it, which you can pray about. And then when they don't take your advice, you don't get offended, you just move on. So, but there's a great example in the Bible, and it's David and Jonathan. Jonathan submitted to David. He submitted to David. He knelt before David, as David would be the future king, and Jonathan, would be kind of his second. And they loved each other. But it's, if you think about it from a logical standpoint, why was Jonathan, who's the son of Saul, who's the current king, why is he submitting to David? Because he was pure of heart. And he knew that David was the king, was going to be the king. So, because of that, and then, Jonathan died later on, which caused David a lot of grief, but then David repaid his love for Jonathan, and he fulfilled his what he said he would do by taking care of his offspring, or his relatives. I think there was the one crippled child that survived. So it's a really valuable thing to have that, but it's something you got to be aware of unsolicited advice. You're full of wisdom. If people don't want to hear it, you need to keep your mouth shut, which is challenging sometimes, because you've got all the answers, except you don't. You just think you do. You might have a bunch of them. It doesn't do any good if you haven't formed a relationship with the person so that they will come to you for advice, or that they want your advice. And you develop this is a discernment, right? You figure out, and then you ask them, hey, do you want my advice? Take it or leave it? No. But you can't just go and tell people what to do because you're full of wisdom. They're not going to appreciate it. Verse 12, the eyes of the Lord preserve knowledge, and he overthroweth the words of the transgressor. So the eyes of the Lord preserve knowledge. Well, what is the knowledge that's been preserved? Anybody? Do we have any knowledge that's been preserved? Thank you. Was that so hard? It's like when Kelly asks questions. I'm just like, keep my mouth shut. Yeah, another trick question. That is, what texts do we have from ancient days? First, that are true and have been preserved. There was a library of Alexandria, which was full of all this knowledge and was destroyed. I have thought when I was younger, and the commies were still, well, at least the Russian commies were still active, and we thought we might get nuked any day. I thought, well, we have libraries full of knowledge spread throughout America. We could always rebuild and stuff, and it's like, well, yeah, we do still have some of these libraries, but now everything's going digital, and so good luck trying to rebuild if you don't have electricity and computers and things like that. He overthroweth the words of the transgressor. So somebody who is sinning is going to say stuff, and they're going to be wrong because they're the transgressor. I'm sure there's better examples than this, but I always think of Titanic, which they'll quibble on who said this, but there was a very high-ranking person of the shipping company said that the Titanic was unsinkable. I don't know if the builder thought that or whatnot, but that's an idiotic thing to ever say. And I think that that was a lesson. You don't declare something like that before the Lord and say something can't be done. I, as man, am so mighty, I've created something that God cannot destroy it, whether you're that explicit or not. God hates that level of pride. God hates that faith in man. I think God blesses us. I think it's obvious. But I think that he blesses us more if we have some acknowledgement, even the unsaved, if there's some acknowledgement towards God. I mean, Donald Trump is not saved. He's not going to save America now. Yes, I would like to see him elected because the alternatives is just tearing us apart. Each day is worse than the last. But he can't save America. But he at least acknowledges that God saved him. I mean, he knows how close he came from the bullet, from dying. The left mocks that he got shot in the ear. Ooh, big whoop. Oh, sure, except that bullet. Have you noticed how the ear is really close to your brain? So, yes. Moving on. The slothful man saith, there is a lion without, I shall be slain in the streets. This is just funny to me. I mean, this is just, I don't know a lot about ancient history. I've had history of civilization and stuff, but they weren't talking about how lions were always running around the streets. I'm sure occasionally there might be a lion, but that was probably not a daily occurrence. So whether it's a lion, or it's too cold, or it's too hot, or it's raining, or whatever, the slothful man always has excuses. I think that's what you can take away from that. And as a parent, we're always trying to get our kids to not make excuses. Okay? You can have reasons for your failure, but it doesn't excuse your failure. And you have to be careful to not conflate those. The reason is not an excuse. It's just, yeah, I was late because of traffic. Okay? Well, then the next thing you should say is, I'll leave earlier next time, so I'm not late in the future, if it's, something that matters, like work. The mouth of a strange woman is a deep pit. He that is abhorred of the Lord shall fall therein. So, the strange woman with a deep pit who's laying traps through deceit and lies. We've had a whole chapter in the past. We've had other smaller segments. But the interesting thing that I noticed here is who falls in the pit? It's not the righteous. It's the person that is abhorred of the Lord shall falls in the pit. I couldn't think of a great example for this, but I did think of an anti-example. Joseph could have fallen in the pit of the strange woman. Now, he was in a really bad situation. But what most, Potiphar's daughter or wife came on to him, right? So most unsaved people would be like, well, what are you going to do? Well, that's, even if that was okay, or it's not wise, you don't sleep with your boss's wife. That's going to end in tears, right? So he did the only thing he could do and ran away, which, ended up with him in prison, but he wasn't dead. Do you think Potiphar would have forgiven him if he'd slept with his wife, even though his wife made him? No. There's other verses in Proverbs. You go sleep with a guy's wife, he's not going to let you go easily. Now, we can't shoot somebody for that and this without consequences, but trust me, some people don't let those consequences stop them. And Potiphar, I can pretty much guarantee you, probably would have killed Joseph. So God protected Joseph, but I'm sure at the time it felt a little bit to Joseph like, well, this is, first I get sold by my brothers into slavery, and then I kind of work my way up here, and then it's like, now I'm in prison. Sure doesn't feel fair, but God was doing something there, and one of the things that I think I've learned, although it doesn't mean I can apply it all the time, is we wait upon the Lord. We're very patient. Because if we're not patient, well, God will work on that. Foolishness is bound in the heart of a child, but the rod of correction shall drive it far from him. This is one of the most critical verses for anybody to read. If you have anything to do with children, if you're a grandparent, you need to try to get your children to do this with their children. If you're a parent, you need to do this. Foolishness, once it's set, takes a miracle of God. Usually salvation is the only way to fix that. It's like concrete. It's bound in the heart of a child. If you don't drive this from your child, from your children when they are young, they will be fools when they're older. It says, the rod of correction shall drive it from him. I looked up some statistics about recidivism. That's a good word. Kelly knows what recidivism is. Does anybody else here know what recidivism is? Recidivism is basically, and I'll probably mangle this, but it's basically somebody commits a crime and then they are punished or rehabilitated, and then how likely are they to commit the crime again? So you want that number to be low because then they're rehabilitated. If it's not low, you're not rehabilitating. Well, guess what? We're not rehabilitating. The numbers are not low. Now, there are people, as Kelly can attest to, as doing public defender work, that just have made mistakes. Okay, good people make mistakes, all right? And they're not on a path of mistake after mistake after mistake. They're not an evil person, okay? There's a guy recently who made a really bad mistake. There was a Baltimore Ravens game. I don't remember who they were playing. Baltimore lost. And so they went out after the game and they found a guy who was a straggler and this big tough guy, kicked him and hit him a few times and stuff. I mean, he got beat up a little bit. It was scary. I'm sure he was scared and it was wrong. The guy first of all, they filmed themselves and then they must have posted it, right? Who thinks this is a great idea? I mean, the guy who was doing the beatdown, big, in shape, white guy, he had a LinkedIn profile. He was an executive and all this stuff. He no longer has a job. He's been arrested, right? Now, he's probably learned his lesson, okay? He's probably very humbled right now. But this is right from I think the Justice Department of some federal organization, which there's statistics, so take it with a grain of salt. Within 10 years, 82% of people have been arrested again. So if they were arrested once, within 10 years, they've been arrested again. Now, how many times have you been arrested? 5 times? 4, 3? I hope nobody in here has been arrested at all. But if you've been arrested, I hope it's just once and you learned your lesson, whatever that was. Like, don't go protest, something like that. Or be careful when you protest. Sorry. Yeah, so I guess what I'm saying is this is just proof that when you have somebody that's 18 or older, there's not a lot of rehabilitation that can go on. God can do miracles, God can work on hearts, and God can change things. But you shouldn't count on that. And it's really important, really, really, really important to make sure that you've done everything you can do as your parent to drive the foolishness out of their hearts. I am too hard on my children. But I would rather err a little bit, or maybe a lot, on being too hard on them because I'm trying to drive the foolishness out than be too easy, like so many of the parents today, and have it bound in their hearts when they're older, okay? I told my wife, and this sounds horrible, and if you want to think poorly of me, it's fine, but I would rather have my children not like me later in life, like be angry at me because I was too mean or something, than to produce children that are a drain on society. Because if they're mad at me because I was too hard on them, I'm the only one that suffers. But if I produce children that are going out and getting addicted to drugs and robbing people and being a drain on society, I'm affecting a lot more people. And trust me, since I now have two that are older, it doesn't make you feel good. If your kid thinks that you were not a very nice dad, it's not a good feeling. And it's something where I try to take the lessons and the mistakes that I made with my older children and maybe make them a little bit less with, still have some young ones or younger ones. So I try to take those lessons, but don't raise foolish children. Don't raise foolish children. That's all I can say to that.